Can we shift a bit to one of your other big topics in the book, which is the evolution of gig working and flexibility of how employment actually works?
Hmm.
If you listen to any of the other podcasts, you know that I'm going to typically, trot out Milton Friedman's old quote that the only purpose of a corporation is within the rules to make profit, and the primary, purpose is protecting shareholders. Employees, customers, society at large, and the environment take a distant second, third, fourth, and fifth. And I believe that kind of gig working is a response to the fact that companies focused exclusively on profit at the expense of employees. But how do you see, in our current times, companies shifting more towards stakeholder capitalism and bringing that into the workforce in the way they're reimagining or re-architecting work?
So that's a great question, but I think it's at least two questions in one. It may be more than two questions. So let me try to address both of them sequentially and then tie them together. There's the question about where we are in the evolution from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And then there's a question on the growth in the different types of employment and worker arrangements, and how those worker arrangements fit into the different social and corporate contracts that we have. I think those are the two questions. That's what I heard. Look, I'm not an expert. Okay, great. I'm not an expert, but I'm, along with you all, a keen observer on the evolution of where we are in stakeholder capitalism. Again, I referred to the human capital trends research we've been doing at Deloitte. I think it's 4 years ago now that we pivoted our research to look at the social enterprise as the way that we viewed where corporate strategy was going. So we've been viewing everything that we do relative to human capital and business strategy through the social enterprise lens. And for us, the social enterprise really encompassed two aspects, two dimensions that seem to be accelerating at different rates around the world, obviously. One was the evolution of the interdependence or the relationship between profit and purpose. We're not the first people to talk about it, but when we wrote about this 4 years ago, this was the early days when people were looking at what BlackRock was talking about, when Larry Fink started talking about it. Then a couple of years ago, we saw the Business Roundtable. And, in 2020, when we found that we were faced with a health crisis and an economic crisis, and at least in the US and some parts of the world, a social and a racial equality crisis, that the integration of these two issues has really come to the forefront. And that is having, at least right now, an impact on, what the role is of corporations and what the role is and the expectations of governments. Um, I'll say my hope, it's not even a guess or a prediction, is that we're going to continue to see the acceleration of stakeholder capitalism, or what we call the social enterprise. The other aspect of the social enterprise that we looked at was the other side of the question that you've asked, which is we looked at the relationship between the company and the community and society, and obviously the environment, profit and purpose. But we also looked at it from the perspective of the company and the ecosystem, right? And historically, we've thought of the company relative to its balance sheet, its income statement, its corporate legal boundaries, right? And the other element, if you will, dimension of the social enterprise, one is profit and purpose. The other is, are we focused on our employees, or are we also focused on all the people that directly or indirectly are part of the production and the services that we provide? We're doing a lot of research now, including with MIT, on what we call the driving the future of work through workforce ecosystems. We're not the first group to point out, but we're one of the groups to highlight that increasingly for many, many, many companies, a significant percentage of their workers are not traditional employees, right? Some of the largest tech companies in the world, you look at their numbers, they have 200,000 people in their workforce. 100,000 have a corporate ID card, and 100,000 have other ID cards. They could be consultants, managed service workers, gig workers. Some of them don't have any card at all. They're crowd workers. They're working in crowd competitions. What we've been looking at is the alternative, we'll call it the alternative workforce. I mentioned earlier when we were getting started, the first piece of research we did on this in 2013 looked at the open talent continuum, the open talent economy. And there's some really interesting dynamics here, which we can go into. There are different reasons that people are hiring and accessing talent, not just acquiring talent through these alternative means. But there's a significant regulatory and public policy issue here, which is if we want to provide incentives so that we can provide flexibility in work, so that you can be a full-time employee or a part-time employee, or you might be a data scientist or a creative designer who doesn't want to work for a company full-time, likes the idea of having a portfolio. One of the things we're trying to figure out around the world is how do we create portable benefits, micro benefits, benefit programs that provide both labor protections, unemployment protection, job transition protection, healthcare protection to workers regardless of the employment and the workforce model that they have. That's really a piece of work that is in progress. I think it's going to be something we're going to see a lot of attention paid to in the next couple of years. And we've seen it in the pandemic. We've seen countries around the world providing government assistance to categories of employees that historically haven't been included in recovery programs, in part because the percentage of people who are working these alternative arrangements are so high. We have to make choices going forward as to, are we going to provide that flexibility, but do it in a way that alternative workers aren't on side streets, but are on well-lit streets where they actually have the same benefits and the same entitlements, regardless of the employment contract that they have. It's a lot of work to be done there.